Have you ever felt completely alone even when surrounded by people? That strange emptiness that creeps in despite having friends, family, or thousands of social media connections? Carl Jung, one of history's most profound psychologists, would tell you that this feeling isn't something to run from. It's actually a doorway. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. These words from Jung capture something essential about our human experience. That feeling of being lost, disconnected, and alone isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's often a sign that your soul is calling you toward something deeper. I want you to pause for a moment. Take a breath. Where are you watching this video from today? Perhaps from your bedroom after a long day where no one really saw you. Maybe from your office desk, surrounded by colleagues who know your professional persona, but not your heart. Or maybe you're in a public space, headphones in, feeling strangely separate from the bustling crowd around you. Wherever you are, I want you to know that this feeling of disconnection has a purpose, and Jung's wisdom can help us understand what that purpose might be. In our hyper-connected world, we face a painful paradox. We've never had more ways to connect, yet studies show loneliness has reached epidemic proportions. We scroll through carefully curated highlights of others' lives while sitting alone with our unfiltered reality. We have hundreds of online friends, but few who would come over at 2 a.m. during a crisis. Jung saw this coming decades before social media existed. He understood that modern life was pulling us away from something essential, our authentic connection to ourselves and to others. What makes this modern loneliness so painful isn't just the absence of others. It's the absence of meaning, purpose, and genuine connection. Jung would say we're experiencing a spiritual crisis disguised as a social one. The emptiness you feel isn't just about needing more friends or more likes on your posts. It's your psyche telling you that something fundamental is missing in how you're relating to yourself and the world. I've been there myself. A few years ago, despite having a successful career, a wide social circle, and what looked like a perfect life on paper, I felt completely hollow inside. I smiled for photos while feeling numb. I attended parties but felt like I was watching myself from a distance, playing a role rather than being present. I had what Jung would call a well-developed persona, the mask we wear for society, but I had lost touch with my authentic self. My relationships felt shallow because I was showing up as a carefully crafted version of myself rather than bringing my whole, messy, contradictory humanity to the table. If you've ever felt this way, like you're going through the motions of life without really living it, like no one truly knows you, like you're somehow both overexposed and completely unseen, I want you to know that you're not alone. In fact, this feeling is so universal that Jung considered it a necessary stage in our psychological development. He called it the dark night of the soul, a painful but potentially transformative period when our old identities and connections no longer satisfy us, but we haven't yet discovered what will. The good news is that Jung didn't just identify this problem. He offered profound insights into how we can move through it. Today, I'm going to share 4 powerful Jungian practices that can transform your experience of loneliness and lostness into something meaningful, connected, and even sacred. These aren't quick fixes or surface-level solutions. They're invitations to a deeper way of living, one where even periods of solitude become rich with meaning and possibility. Before we dive in, I want to acknowledge something important. If you're experiencing severe depression or persistent thoughts of self-harm, please reach out to a mental health professional. The practices we'll discuss today can complement professional help, but they're not replacements for it. Your well-being matters, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for support. For those of you who are navigating more ordinary forms of loneliness and disconnection, the kind that comes with being human in a fragmented world, these Jungian practices can be truly transformative. They've changed my life and the lives of many others I've worked with. So let's begin this journey together. The first powerful practice Jung would recommend when you're feeling lost and alone is to confront your shadow. Jung defined the shadow as the parts of ourselves that we've rejected, denied, or pushed into the unconscious. It's everything we don't want to see about ourselves, our jealousy, anger, selfishness, fear, and other qualities we consider unacceptable. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When we're feeling isolated, our first instinct is often to blame external circumstances. Other people don't understand us. Society is too superficial. We haven't found our tribe yet. While these factors can certainly contribute to our loneliness, Jung would gently redirect our attention inward. He would ask, what parts of yourself are you hiding from others? What emotions or thoughts do you consider too dark, too needy, too messy to share? What aspects of your humanity have you deemed unlovable? The paradox Jung discovered is this: the parts of ourselves that we hide are precisely what would allow us to form deeper connections with others. When we present only our polished, perfect selves to the world, we create relationships based on partial truths. No wonder we feel unseen and unknown. We're actively hiding our full humanity. This shadow work isn't comfortable. In fact, it can be deeply challenging, but it's incredibly liberating. When I first began exploring my own shadow, I discovered how much energy I was expending trying to appear completely self-sufficient. I had internalized the belief that needing others was a weakness, so I kept people at arm's length. I was the friend who always helped but never asked for help. The irony wasn't lost on me. My fear of appearing needy was actually creating the very isolation I was suffering from. Jung would suggest starting this shadow work with a simple practice. Notice what you judge most harshly in others. Our judgments often reveal our shadows. We're most triggered by qualities in others that we've disowned in ourselves. Do you find yourself irritated by people who seem attention-seeking? Perhaps you've suppressed your own natural desire for recognition and validation. Are you annoyed by others' emotional expressions? You might be denying your own emotional needs. When you identify a shadow aspect, try this. Sit quietly with yourself and imagine having a conversation with this disowned part. What does your neediness want to tell you? What does your anger need you to understand? What wisdom might your selfishness actually contain? This internal dialogue, which Jung called active imagination, can reveal surprising insights. One client of mine discovered that her irritation with needy friends was actually protecting her from the pain of acknowledging her own unmet needs for support. Once she could embrace her natural human need for connection and begin asking for help, her relationships deepened dramatically. The very vulnerability she had been avoiding became the bridge to the intimacy she craved. Here's what makes this practice so powerful for combating loneliness. When you integrate your shadow, you become more whole. This wholeness radiates authenticity that others can sense. People are naturally drawn to those who have done the inner work to accept their full humanity. And when you've made peace with your own shadows, you create safe space for others to bring their whole selves to the relationship too. If you're willing to try this practice, I'd love to hear about your experience. What aspect of yourself have you been hiding that might actually help you connect more deeply if you brought it into the light? Share your reflections in the comments. Your vulnerability might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. The second Jungian practice for transforming loneliness involves cultivating your inner garden, or what Jung would call developing a relationship with your inner world. Jung believed that modern humans suffer because we've become disconnected from the rich symbolic life of our psyche. We're so externally focused, constantly seeking validation and connection outside ourselves, that we've neglected the profound resources within. Jung eloquently expressed this idea when he said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." This isn't just poetic language. It's a practical invitation to shift our attention. When we feel lonely and lost, our instinct is often to fill the void with distractions. Social media, dating apps, busy social calendars, work achievements, or other external validations. But Jung would suggest that these moments of painful isolation are actually perfect opportunities to develop our relationship with ourselves. Practically speaking, how do we cultivate this inner garden? It begins with creating sacred space for solitude. Not the empty scrolling through your phone kind of alone time, but intentional receptive solitude. This might look like a daily meditation practice, regular journaling, or even walks in nature without technological distractions. The key is to approach this time not as something to endure until real life happens again, but as an opportunity to meet yourself more deeply. Jung was particularly interested in dreams as gateways to our inner landscape. He saw dreams not as random neural firings but as meaningful communications from our unconscious. When you're feeling especially disconnected or lost, pay particular attention to your dreams. Keep a dream journal by your bed and write down whatever you remember upon waking, without censoring or interpreting. Over time, you might notice patterns, recurring symbols, or even direct guidance related to your feelings of isolation. Another powerful practice is active imagination, a method Jung developed for engaging with the unconscious while awake. Find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed. Close your eyes and bring to mind an image that feels significant to you, perhaps something from a recent dream, or simply an image that arises spontaneously when you think about your loneliness. Allow this image to develop as if you're watching a movie unfold. You might even engage in dialogue with figures that appear. The key is to let the unconscious lead rather than directing the process with your conscious mind. What many people discover through these practices is that loneliness often signals not just a hunger for external connection, but a need to reconnect with parts of ourselves we've neglected. One woman I worked with realized through her dream work that her persistent feeling of abandonment wasn't just about her difficult relationship history. It was her creative self begging for attention after years of practical focus on career and family. As she began painting again, a passion she'd abandoned in college, her sense of isolation diminished, even before she made any new social connections. This inner work creates what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming more fully yourself. And paradoxically, the more individuated you become, the more you develop your unique qualities and perspectives, the more authentic your connections with others can be. When you've developed a rich relationship with yourself, you no longer approach others from a place of desperate need. Instead, you bring a sense of fullness and authentic presence that creates the foundation for meaningful bonds. I invite you to try this. The next time loneliness strikes, instead of immediately reaching for your phone or making plans to distract yourself, set aside 10 minutes to sit with the feeling. Where do you feel it in your body? What images arise when you give it space? What might this feeling be inviting you to discover about yourself? Then share what you learn. What insight emerged from your 10 minutes of inner attention? Your experience might illuminate the path for someone else feeling similarly adrift. The third transformative practice Jung would recommend involves reconnecting with meaningful symbols and stories that can orient us during times of confusion and isolation. Jung was fascinated by the power of symbols, those universal images and motifs that appear across cultures and throughout human history. He discovered that these symbols aren't just artistic expressions, they're psychological tools that help us navigate life's most challenging transitions and emotions. When we feel lost and alone, Jung would say we're experiencing what mythologists call being in the wilderness, a time of disorientation when old maps no longer work and new ones haven't yet emerged. Throughout history, humans have used myths, rituals, and symbols to make sense of these wilderness experiences. But in our modern secular society, we've largely lost touch with these orienting stories and symbols. Jung believed this disconnection from symbolic life contributes significantly to our sense of isolation. Without meaningful stories to contextualize our struggles, we experience them as purely personal failures rather than archetypal human journeys. The hero separated from their community, the wanderer in the desert, the orphan seeking home. These symbolic patterns help us understand our experiences as part of the larger human story. How can we reconnect with this symbolic dimension? 1. Approach is to pay attention to what Jung called synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to offer guidance or confirmation. Have you ever noticed how, during particularly challenging periods, certain images, numbers, animals, or themes seem to appear repeatedly in your life? Jung would encourage you to approach these patterns not as random occurrences, but as potential messages from your unconscious. A client once shared how, during a period of profound loneliness after moving to a new city, she kept encountering owls in artwork, in nature, even in casual conversations. Rather than dismissing these coincidences, she researched the symbolic meaning of owls across cultures and discovered they often represent wisdom, transition, and seeing in darkness. This symbolic perspective helped her reframe her isolation, not as a punishment, but as a time of developing inner vision and wisdom that would eventually serve her and others. Another way to engage with symbolic life is through active exploration of myths, fairy tales, and sacred texts that resonate with you. When you find yourself in emotional wilderness, ask, what stories throughout human history speak to this experience? What characters have navigated similar terrain? You might be drawn to the biblical story of Job, the Greek myth of Persephone's descent to the underworld, or the fairy tale of the ugly duckling, stories that address themes of isolation, transformation, and eventual reintegration. Jung would also invite us to create personal rituals that give form and meaning to our experiences. Rituals serve as bridges between our inner and outer worlds, between the personal and collective dimensions of life. They don't need to be elaborate or based in any particular tradition. The essential quality is that they feel meaningful to you and help externalize inner experiences. For example, if you're struggling with feeling unseen, you might create a simple ritual where you light a candle and speak aloud what you wish others could see in you. Or if you're grieving the loss of a connection, you might write a letter expressing everything you wish you could say, then release it through burning or burying it. These symbolic actions help us process emotions that might otherwise remain stuck and unintegrated. What makes this symbolic work so powerful for addressing loneliness is that it connects our personal suffering to the universal human experience. When we recognize our struggles as part of larger patterns that humans have been navigating for millennia, we feel less individually flawed or singled out. There's profound comfort in realizing that countless others have walked similar paths and found their way through. I'd love to hear what symbols or stories have been appearing in your life lately. Has a particular animal, image, or theme been showing up repeatedly? What myth or fairy tale feels like it might contain wisdom for your current situation? Share in the comments. Your symbolic insights might create meaningful connections with others experiencing similar patterns. The fourth and final Jungian practice for transforming loneliness involves finding or creating your authentic community. Jung understood that true belonging isn't about being surrounded by just any people. It's about finding connections where both your common humanity and your unique individuality are honored. He captured this beautifully when he wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." This transformation Jung speaks of is what distinguishes authentic community from mere social gathering. In authentic community, we're not just entertaining each other or filling time, we're actually impacting and being impacted by one another in ways that foster growth and deeper understanding. The challenge many of us face today is that we've substituted convenience for depth in our relationships. We maintain numerous shallow connections rather than investing in the vulnerable, sometimes uncomfortable work of creating deep bonds. We text instead of talking, we share highlights instead of struggles, we network instead of truly connecting. Jung would say these surface-level interactions fail to nourish our souls because they engage only our personas, our social masks, rather than our authentic selves. So how do we find or create authentic community in a world that often prioritizes quantity over quality in relationships? Jung would suggest starting with authenticity rather than likability. Many of us have been trained since childhood to be pleasant, agreeable, and inoffensive, to fit in rather than to truly belong. We learn to read the room and become whatever version of ourselves seems most acceptable in each context. The irony is that while this social chameleon strategy might help us avoid rejection, it actually prevents the very connections we're seeking. When we present only carefully curated versions of ourselves, we end up feeling lonely even in company because no one is actually connecting with our authentic self. Instead, Jung would encourage us to practice what he called individuation in community, the process of becoming more fully yourself while in relationship with others. This begins with the courageous act of showing up as you really are, with all your contradictions, quirks, passions, and vulnerabilities intact. It means speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable, asking for what you need even when it feels exposing, and expressing your unique perspective even when it differs from the group. This authenticity functions as a kind of filter or magnet, repelling connections that would require you to diminish yourself and attracting those who appreciate your particular medicine for the world. As Jung put it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. When we commit to this privilege, we naturally draw others who are on a similar journey of authenticity. Finding your authentic community often involves asking different questions than we typically do when seeking connection. Instead of, "Where can I meet people who share my interests?" try asking, "Where can I meet people who share my values and approach to life?" Instead of focusing exclusively on common hobbies or demographic similarities, look for what Jung would call resonance of soul, that ineffable sense of recognition when you encounter someone operating at a similar depth or frequency. Sometimes, finding authentic community means looking in unexpected places. One man I worked with found his deepest connections not in his professional circles or neighborhood as he expected, But in a grief support group he reluctantly attended after losing his father. The raw authenticity required in that setting created bonds stronger than those he'd developed over decades in more surface-level interactions. Another woman discovered her tribe in a volunteer organization where shared values and purpose created natural bridges across differences in age, background, and life experience. For many people, authentic community emerges not from searching for like-minded others, but from courageously sharing their own gifts and truth. When you offer your unique perspective, talents, or insights, especially those you've been hesitant to reveal, you create an opening for genuine connection. Your vulnerability becomes an invitation for others to meet you in that authentic space. Consider what specific quality of connection you're truly hungry for. Is it intellectual stimulation, emotional understanding, spiritual companionship, creative collaboration? By clarifying what kind of nourishment your soul specifically needs, you can be more intentional about where and how you seek community. Jung would also remind us that meaningful connection isn't limited to human relationships. During periods of human isolation, many find profound comfort and lessons in relationship with the natural world, with animals, with creative practice, or with spiritual experience. These connections can sustain us while we're in the process of finding or building our human tribe. I invite you to reflect on one relationship in your life where you feel you can be fully yourself without monitoring or editing your authentic expression. What quality makes this relationship different? How might you bring more of this quality into other connections? Share your thoughts. Your insight might help someone else recognize or cultivate similar authenticity in their relationships. As we draw our exploration of Jung's wisdom to a close, I want to offer a perspective that ties together everything we've discussed today. Jung understood that loneliness and feeling lost aren't simply problems to be solved. They're invitations to a more authentic and meaningful way of living. When we feel disconnected, it's often because we've been living too much on the surface of life, too identified with our social roles and external achievements, too disconnected from our depths. The darkness of isolation can feel like punishment, but Jung would see it as an initiation, a necessary passage on the path to wholeness. Just as seeds germinate in darkness before pushing toward the light, our most profound growth often begins in periods of painful separation. The question isn't how to escape these dark nights of the soul as quickly as possible, but how to move through them with awareness, extracting their wisdom and allowing ourselves to be transformed by them. Each practice we've explored, confronting our shadow, cultivating our inner garden, reconnecting with meaningful symbols, and finding authentic community, represents a different facet of the same essential journey. The journey from fragmentation toward wholeness, from alienation toward belonging, from persona toward authentic selfhood. This journey isn't linear or once and done. We cycle through these territories throughout our lives, each time with the opportunity to integrate more of ourselves, to discard more of what isn't truly ours, to connect more authentically with both our inner depths and with others. And while this path may at times feel solitary, Jung would remind us that we're actually participating in the great human adventure that countless others have walked before us and alongside us. Jung captured this paradoxical truth when he wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." The clarity we seek isn't found by accumulating more external validations or connections, but by developing a deeper relationship with ourselves. And from this foundation of self-knowledge and self-acceptance, our connections with others naturally become more meaningful, more nourishing, and more real. I want to leave you with a story that illustrates this transformative journey. A woman came to me feeling profoundly isolated despite a busy life and large social network. As we worked together, she discovered that she'd been playing the role of the strong one since childhood, always supporting others but never allowing herself to be vulnerable or needy. This pattern had earned her admiration but prevented authentic intimacy. Through shadow work, she began to embrace her own needs and vulnerabilities. Through inner garden work, she developed a richer relationship with her creativity and spirituality. Through symbolic work, she recognized her situation in the archetype of the wounded healer. And through intentional community building, she began attracting relationships where reciprocity and authenticity were valued. The transformation wasn't immediate or easy. There were periods of greater isolation as she stepped away from connections that no longer served her growth. There were uncomfortable conversations as she began showing up differently in existing relationships. There were moments of doubt when easier, more familiar patterns beckoned. But gradually, something remarkable happened. Not only did she develop deeper, more nourishing connections with others, but the quality of her aloneness changed as well. What had once felt like empty, painful, isolation became solitude rich with meaning, creativity, and presence. She discovered that addressing loneliness isn't just about being with others more often, it's about being more fully present with yourself, so that whether you're alone or with others, you're bringing your whole self to the experience. This is the gift that Jung's wisdom offers us. Not a quick fix for loneliness, but a profound reframing of what connection really means and how we might approach it more authentically. It's an invitation to use periods of isolation not just as problems to solve, but as initiations into a more meaningful way of being human. If something in this video has resonated with you today, I'd love to hear which of Jung's practices speaks most directly to your current experience. Which aspect of this wisdom feels like it might hold a key for your unique situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflection might be exactly what another member of this community needs to hear. Remember that while this journey toward authentic connection often begins in solitude, you're not truly alone in walking it. Each of us is navigating these same fundamental human territories, seeking the same essential nourishment of being fully seen and accepted. By sharing our insights, struggles, and breakthroughs with one another, we create a field of mutual support that makes the path a little less solitary for everyone. If you've found value in this exploration of Jung's wisdom, consider subscribing to join our community of seekers committed to living with greater depth and authenticity. Together, we're rediscovering ancient wisdom that speaks directly to our modern longings for meaning and connection. Until next time, may you find richness even in your solitude, and may your connections with others reflect the authenticity you're cultivating within. As Jung himself might say, the dark night always eventually yields to dawn, and when that dawn comes, you'll bring to it a self more whole, more real, and more capable of truly connecting than before the darkness fell. Thank you for watching this exploration of Jung's wisdom on loneliness and feeling lost. I want to leave you with this final thought from Jung himself. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Your current feelings of isolation don't define you. They're simply part of your larger journey toward becoming more fully yourself. And in that becoming, you'll discover connections more authentic and nourishing than any you've known before. If this message spoke to your heart today, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need these insights, and subscribe to join our community of seekers. Remember, the journey toward authentic connection begins with a single courageous step, and you've already taken that step by being here today. Until next time, trust the process. The very loneliness that feels so painful now may be preparing you for depths of connection you cannot yet imagine. As Jung would say, sometimes we need to be fully alone before we can be authentically together.